Hello and welcome back to Unfiltered Church Talk, a space where we have honest conversations about the realities within the church today. If you have ever experienced church hurt, manipulation, spiritual abuse, or silent battles within ministry, then this platform is for you. Here we speak truth with love, not to tear down the church, but to restore its purity and integrity. In part 2 of our podcast, we are looking at instances when the church becomes the source of hurt or church trauma. In our previous episode, we looked at ways in which church members can inflict church wounds on each other. I remember pointing out that most times they do this because of the enabling environment. We also pointed out that it is hard to completely ignore the role of the pastors or leadership in creating this trauma. Let's talk about that today. Personally, one of the things I really struggled with in church is when my talents and callings are suppressed. Many believers too struggle with this. Romans 12 chapter 6 verse 8 clearly tells us that we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. Everyone has their place and should never compete with another. Exodus 35 verse 10 to 11 is a scripture where God's people were encouraged to use their skills to build the tabernacle. In this scripture, you realize that each talent matters. My talent matters. Guys, my talent matters. In Exodus 35, it was a call for mobilization of talent for God's service. God requires not just willing hearts, but also practical skills. This scripture highlights a community-drawn effort where everyone has a part to play in the service at the sanctuary. No one's talent should ever be suppressed. Sometimes a pastor can remove someone from service, like we saw in the example I gave in the last episode. However, sometimes they may not remove you directly. Instead, they make your service so difficult that you eventually give up. This can be done through subtle actions that frustrate you, discourage, and even push people out of service. Let me mention one thing that really got to me when I was in a particular church: constant criticism. Nothing you do is ever good. Constant criticism of how you do it, of who you are, your person. Then there is that lack of appreciation. Whenever you do something, it is not spiritual enough. It doesn't meet the threshold. So that lack of appreciation, despite the effort a member puts in whatever area or whatever capacity, can really break a person. And when it is compounded with changing rules, suddenly rules are changed. So that by the time you are being corrected, you find that you are offside when you are supposed to be doing something in a certain agreed way, and then suddenly rules change. Maybe arrival times are changed. Rules can be changed suddenly and in a very unrealistic way to make sure that you don't meet those rules. Remember, we are talking about how they can make your service so difficult so that you eventually give up. Then another is blocking the decisions you make. Whatever you decide to do is blocked. It's blocked. Eventually, you start feeling like everything you do is wrong and you give up. This is also a form of manipulation, by the way, because it causes you to be very timid in service and to doubt your calling and capabilities. Their main aim is to break your spirit. Then the other thing they do is to correct you publicly instead of privately. Instead of guidance, the correction becomes humiliation. Proverbs 15 verse 1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Besides humiliation, public correction can make you feel very infuriated and you feel angry. But because this is your leadership, you cannot quite react or come out in anger the way you would naturally do. So it breaks your confidence and destroys the joy of service you once had. Instead of building the ministry together, leadership begins to feel like an obstacle. There are times when church workers are not directly removed. Instead, the environment becomes so heavy and discouraging that continuing becomes painful. What began as joyful service to God becomes pressure. You begin to wonder whether your presence is welcome, whether you have outlived your usefulness, and eventually people step away, not because they stopped loving God, but because the environment became too difficult. Serving in church should not feel like walking on eggshells. Leadership should build people, not break them. And sometimes the greatest wounds in ministry do not come from the world. They come from inside the church. I have personally experienced this. Despite the deliberate frustration, I went on until I got burnt out. By the time I accepted the reality that it was not working, I had given 11 years of service to this particular ministry, and the mere acceptance that it was not working dug a very deep hole in my heart. The feeling of betrayal and having been taken for granted for 11 years was so immense. It took more than 3 years of struggling to break free from the bitterness. The input I had in that ministry really had to count for something. But when you come out and feel like it was never appreciated, people can live without it, it makes you feel bad, really bad. A Christian may have a genuine calling. They may have a talent. They may have the desire to serve. But sometimes leadership can begin to see that gift not as a blessing, but as a threat. They may feel like maybe you are getting noticed too much for their liking. And that is when they decide to make your service to God extremely difficult. Instead of nurturing the gift, it is controlled. Instead of encouraging the person, they are sidelined. Instead of opening doors, the doors quietly and surely close. Sometimes the message becomes very subtle. You are told you are not ready, or wait for the right time. It's not yet your time. Be patient. Trust the process. Those are the statements you will hear. But in essence, they are excuses for the bottlenecks they are bringing to your ministry. But that waiting can continue for years, while less qualified people are elevated simply because they belong to certain inner circles. This is where church politics begins to appear, and it can be deeply discouraging for believers who only wanted to serve God sincerely. I want to encourage you that Psalm 147 verse 3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." I want to believe that now that we are talking about this, we who have faced this church hurt are going to overcome we shall find our healing. Another issue that creates church hurt and confusion in many churches is lack of financial accountability and integrity. I want to talk about two different friends of mine. One friend had a very sick mother, and she had done all she had. She had spent so much money and had reached her road's end, her end. And she went to this pastor and asked him to pray for the mother's healing. Then she was told he cannot pray until she gives a certain amount of money. She was made to believe that this money would be a sacrifice, and it would be the point of contact between her and God for her mother's healing. That was the last time she went to that pastor or even to that church. She was so hurt. There is this other friend who, because she saw like the church was in a difficult place financially, and there was a group of visitors who were coming for a conference, she quietly talked to the pastor, and as the pastor was talking, he requested her if she could loan him a certain amount of money to complete the conference, promising to return the money. This friend of mine gave out that money. But later, this man of God claimed he had never taken the loan from her, and she had given it out of free will. Of course, the rest is history. So members can be encouraged to give. They are told that giving is part of faithfulness. Their blessings, their promotion, their healing, their breakthroughs are tied to how much they give. They are reminded about tithes, offerings, building funds, special seeds, and many other financial contributions. And these reminders can go overboard. But in many places, there is very little transparency about how those funds are used. Questions about finances are sometimes treated as rebellion. People are told that asking questions shows lack of faith. But responsible stewardship, in my view, should never really fear accountability. When there is no transparency, suspicion begins to grow, and suspicion can slowly erode trust within the congregation. This area of financial accountability is an area we will revisit in subsequent podcasts. So this is a main area that really hurts. It really hurts people, and they choose to walk away. Another form of church hurt arises from disrespect and control. In some church environments, members are expected to show unlimited respect to leadership, but the same respect is not reciprocated. People's voices are dismissed. Their concerns are ignored. And sometimes people are spoken to in ways that are humiliating or belittling. The respect is not always shown to them in return. When this happens repeatedly, people begin to feel that they are not valued as individuals, They are only valued as long as they remain silent, relevant, or compliant, or as long as they are useful. But the church was never meant to function like that. The church was meant to be a community of believers, not a system of control. Why is church hurt so deep? Why is church hurt so deep? The main reason is because people come to church with open hearts. People come looking for fellowship. They come looking for spiritual guidance. They come looking for love. They come looking for a place where they can bring up their children, where their children can learn things in the model that Christ gave us. When anything veers off that model, the trust is tramped up. When wounds happen in that environment, the pain is multiplied, because it feels like the place that was meant to represent God has instead become a place of disappointment. You find many people walk away quietly. Others just go through the motions. Given, failures will happen in church because we are not perfect. Mistakes will happen. But why do we ignore issues? Why do we cover up? Why do we justify wrongs that are done to people? Let us check every wrong behavior. Let us normalize checking. If we don't, our spiritual health and that of the entire community will be damaged. We are here to say that church hurt is real. We are here to say that it affects us more than the average believer wants to admit. Let us learn to speak about it honestly. Let us not do it with the main motive being to attack the church. This conversation may make so many people uncomfortable, but let us make this platform a place of truth and the church a place of accountability and genuine love. Let us go towards our healing by simply acknowledging that a problem exists. This has been Unfiltered Church Talk, a place where we ask the difficult questions and have conversations many people are afraid to start. If you like the content in this video, please hit the notification bell so that you can get more. Subscribe to this channel, like and share, and don't forget to make a comment. Thank you for listening.